Thank you for listening to this episode of Lending Thoughts, sponsored by Rocket Pro. Today, I'll be joined by Megan McDonald, Senior Vice President of Single Family Residential Sales at MCAP, an industry legend, truly. So I'm very excited to have this conversation. Megan talks about things such as living by design, not by default. She's very intentional. We talk about people working with people, not companies. And I love what she has to say about rethinking sales and sales culture at companies today. You're not going to want to miss this conversation. Have a listen. Megan, thanks for joining me today.
No, thanks so much for having me.
My pleasure. So I always like to start with the same question that opens the door to whatever you open the door to. So can you tell us your life story in 60 seconds or less, please?
Absolutely. So let's start with born of two crazy parents, entrepreneurs, troublemaker, horrible student, ended up taking over my father's mech at the age of 16 because he became very ill. I then went on to become a university graduate from UVic, did a stint at BCIT, was one credit short, then ended up working at my first official job in the industry at First National at the age of 22. Was recruited to MCAP by the time I was 25, the youngest BDM in history at that stage. I went on at 28 to move to Waterloo, where I ended up managing the call center for MCAP. I moved to Toronto shortly after that, managed an alternative brand called Eclipse, found my way back to Vancouver, ended up marrying the love of my life, Clayton Blaney, and then I moved on to being the SVP of MCAP sales. In a total, I've had 6 different roles at MCAP, and this October will be my 20th year.
That is amazing. And thank you for being so concise. Although there's so much there, I don't even know where to start. It sounds like a series of first things just happening to you, and then ultimately everything worked out in the end. Am I gathering that correct? And that, you were thrust into a few things to start?
Yeah, I would say my life has been a bit of a roller coaster, but a ride I took more than willingly. I think there's moments in your life where you are either given the greatest opportunity or a great choice to make. And I think one of the things that I was blessed with very early on as a child was courage. And so I just kept saying yes to things and yes to things, whether I was quite there yet or where someone thinks they should be in their development to make it happen. But I had a lot of charisma, I had a lot of confidence, and I had learned one valuable lesson from my father, and that was no one does it alone. So every time I was given an opportunity, I found my tribe, my people who would ultimately secure my success.
Mm-hmm. Well, you've obviously developed a lot of relationships along the way to get to where you are. So I am curious, there is a bit of an aura and or brand around you that you seem to be very, very strong with. I'm curious, is that something that you've developed in recent years, or, was 16 or 22-year-old Megan at, stop 1 or stop 2 or 25-year-old Megan? Like, at what point do you say, like, I need to develop relationships, I need people to know who I am, what I'm about, and I actually need to hone that intentionally?
Yeah, well, definitely intentionally. I live my life very much by design, not by default. I like to lead. I don't like to follow. And one of the things I did very, very early on in my career is I went to a golf tournament. I was invited by First National to attend a golf tournament. And I was simply one of the whole sitters, they say, just invited to say hello to people. And when I introduced myself as Megan McDonald, Vice President of Sales, even though technically at the time I had the title of Facts Girl. And this was my opportunity to kind of set a different tone about what my life would be like and giving people the impression that I had very big dreams. I do believe that one of the fundamental things that can change your life is when you speak about your dreams and you speak about them out loud. You'd be surprised how many people will listen and how many people want to help you with those dreams. I also became very astute very early on of understanding that people don't work with companies, they work with people in companies. And, over 20 years of speaking and interviewing mortgage brokers and really anybody who's going to buy anything, I always ask, what do you base your referrals on? How do you tell somebody about somebody when you like them? And it always wasn't, oh, I like Royal LePage, use them to sell your home, or oh, I like this brokerage, use them to get your mortgage. It's always a name of a person that comes first and then a company. It's always use Jim at Royal LePage. It's use Rosie at MCAP. And so I think what people need to understand is that people don't work with companies, they work with people. And if that is true, if we're going to settle on the fact that that is a true fact, then what I would say is that this is your moment to decide your brand and how your personal brand accompanies and joins and builds with the brand of company you've chosen to be with. So for myself, when I joined MCAP, what I loved about it was I was innovative. It was an underdog at the time. It wanted great things and it wanted to make a name for itself. Well, nothing could have matched up with me in the moment better than MCAP.
It's like looking in the mirror. Yeah.
Right. Like, I mean, I just started talking big because MCAP was talking big. And I started talking about what I wanted to do and how I wanted to do it. And it was such an amazing moment at the age of 34 when I actually became the vice president of MCAP. And so many of my broker partners remembered that day at the golf tournament.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So I'm curious, do you introduce yourself as the VP of sales now, or is there some other introductory title in which you go by?
Yeah. You know, it's funny. Titles meant a lot to me when I was younger. That was the indication of growth. That was the signifier that I had reached another level. Now I look at it very differently. My voicemail doesn't even have my title in it. You know, my email does, it's this official MCAP email address. But overall, when I go to events, I talk to people and I simply say that my name's Megan and I happen to be in sales. I happen to help people connect, and I often allow different groups within MCAP to collaborate to create great decisions. I think you do get to a point where you're more than happy to introduce your people by their titles to show how far your people have come and to celebrate their success. But there is a moment, and there is actually a book on it called The Second Mountain, where it describes how you do get to a point when your moment is more about helping others than about helping yourself. And that is a good transition for us all to finally make. And there is a reason for that
Mm-hmm.
first mountain to exist to get to you to where you want to go. But there is a moment when that does all change.
I agree. And I often relate this back to people when they talk about money. So it's typically very wealthy people that are the first to tell you that money doesn't matter. Money won't buy you happiness. Money won't buy all these things. But, the people who haven't made it yet, let's say,
Yeah.
they're going after that, right? And they're like, okay, I'll figure that out when I get there. But it's very easy to say in hindsight that money doesn't matter. And it's very easy to say in hindsight that title doesn't matter. But when you want it, it's important and it will drive you and it will help you shape the person that you want to become. And if you're doing the right things, it will also help shape your actions, which I don't think is a bad thing in itself. But there's one of my favorite sayings, which is what got you here won't get you there. So at some point, shedding that to know that, like, okay, I no longer need to carry this raft around anymore. Like, this comeuppance story that I built myself around is no longer necessary. And instead, we've arrived and I'm going to be comfortable with where I'm at today. And I'm going to have some fun with that. Another thing that you're comfortable with that I think is probably made to be uncomfortable for a lot of people unnecessarily in our industry is the title sales. And I actually have noticed this about you, and I've noticed this about the MCAP team, is that you guys are very open about the fact that you work in sales and your job is to drive sales. And I think for maybe a decade or so, like, people just started like trying to shed the title as if it
Yeah.
was a poor thing. But I've noticed maybe a resurgence. Can you maybe just speak to how you guys think about sales culturally and how you personally think
Yeah,
about that?
absolutely. Years ago, nearly, I would say 17 years ago, I remember I did a presentation to brokers and I actually showed a picture of a cat walking out of a bag. And I said, this is a message to all of you. The cat's out of the bag. I'm in sales. I'm here to tell you what I do. I'm here to tell you what I want. I'm here to ask it directly from each and every one of you. If you like what I say and you like what I do, that I am expecting business. And it was pretty shocking to the group. Usually they come in and they try to hide that fact. And I said, I know, I don't know why it's a point of shame. I think sales is one of the most incredible things as human beings we do. And Most people will not recognize that in 99% of the jobs out there, you are selling to some extent. Selling is about understanding other people, not manipulating other people. The problem is sales has been given a dirty word, and it ain't dirty at all. In fact, it's amazing, it's creative, it's curious, it's dynamic, it's evolving, it's changing, and it's all about listening. I mean, I'd want a person to say to me, I want to sell to you, Megan. So please tell me everything about you because I'm going to learn it. And then I'm going to sell you what's only applicable to you and your needs. I don't want someone who's pretending to be my friend. I want someone who is looking to be
Hmm.
my friend so we can mutually benefit from the transaction. I mean, my husband always jokes around, can I please speak to my wife, not Megan McDonald of MCAP? Because I can't help myself
I get
but
that one a
sell that
lot.
you be
Yeah.
my husband. Because at the end of the day, I'm looking for collaboration. I'm looking
Yeah.
for a win-win. Paul Bruce, who's my boss, one of my greatest mentors, he said, a bad deal will never turn into a good deal. And a bad deal is when one person is winning more than the other. And those deals never last. So the
Hmm.
sales at MCAP that we do, we are unfiltered. We want your business. We love your business. You are our chosen market mortgage brokers. We will do anything to try and create this partnership. So we want to hear about everything you're doing, why you're doing it, and how we might be able to help. And if we can help, we ask for your business.
I love that. It actually brings me back to my days as an account executive, which is the equivalent of a BDM over here in the Canadian side. And I was in the US at that time. And I used to have a policy where I wouldn't sign up a new account unless they were ready to submit their first mortgage inside of the first 72 hours. And that was my rule. And I would talk to these brokerages. They were so used to hearing from account executives or BDMs, as we call them here, who were just saying, like, sign up with me, sign up with me, sign up with me, work with us and whatnot. And they were just willing to like send them over this, sign up package. They get the package back and they're like, all right, you're all activated. You're good to go. You can start submitting whenever you're ready. And I had a whole process built around it. And our company ended up building an entire process around it. You had mandatory training that you had to do in order to be able to submit to us. You had to fill out a couple additional forms. We actually added friction rather than removing friction. And then
Right.
came up with volume commitments. And then I personally came up with my own, I need to deal within the first 72 hours. Otherwise, you're not working with me. And the reason why was I
Amazing.
looked at the data. These brokers who had
Yeah.
gone on weeks, months, like once 30 days or 90 days had passed and they hadn't submitted a
The
deal.
chance of them partnering with you are zero.
Yeah, we just weren't part of their go-to set of lenders. And I would tell them all beforehand, here's the suite of products that we offer. What type of business do you do? Now, in the States, I will say the amount of data that you have is vast. Like you actually know where they do their mortgages, what products they're doing outside. In Canada, a lot of it's guesswork. But you
Yeah.
can still have the same type of interview. The brokers didn't know we had that data, but we would have open conversations and I would say, how much business did you do last year? Where did you do that business? Like by region and by product and all that stuff. And then say, you know what? I think maybe we should work together. Sometimes, often say, like, I don't think we're a great lender for you and the type of business that you're doing.
Yep.
And if I would ultimately come to the idea where I'm like, hey, it's time to actually sell, I think we have a good partnership that'll work, then it was, do you think you can submit a deal to me in the next 3 days? If not, then, let's put this off a little while. And if they're like, yeah,
I
I've
love
got one for you right now, I'm like, awesome, let's go.
I think that's fantastic. There is such a benefit of immediacy in that partnership. Number one, because you get a commitment. Number two, because they try you out. Number three, you get to find out if there's something wrong with that relationship really quickly. Because here's what we don't sell at MCAP, we don't sell perfection, we sell partnership. So let's say you do send us that deal within the first 3 days. We're going to find out what went wrong along the process if something happened, and we're going to rectify it really quickly. And then we're going to be the reassurance that we're the type of company, even if it's not perfect, it's going to work in the end for you. And I think there's something so wonderful about keeping timelines, having data, and being vulnerable as a
Mm.
salesperson and talking about the types of things that can go wrong in our mortgage process and the types of things we do when things go wrong, as well as the everyday things that just go fantastic. I mean, when you think about the amount of volume that MCAP does in a day, and to think that one escalation a month may hit my desk tells you that we rely on an amazing amount of process and systems that have been challenged and tried and revised for 25 years. Those are the conversations I have with brokers.
Hmm. I love that idea of basically knowing things are going to go wrong in advance. Yeah. Do you ever just tell brokers like, hey, things are going to fall apart sometimes and we'll be here to fix it?
Yeah, because here's the thing. I mean, I've been in this job at MCAP nearly 20 years, as I mentioned, and there's nothing you can't resolve. There's
Hmm.
nothing you can't resolve. I mean, at the end of the day, we have a lot of power to do the right thing. It's whether a lender chooses to do the right thing.
Hmm. Yeah. And I think that reframes and makes you think beyond just the next deal, because oftentimes as a broker, it is hard to get past the next deal. I mean, how many times have you heard like, I'm never using you guys again? Um, it's like, okay, I mean, you can only do that so many times before you're just out of lenders. So instead of that, let's work together, right?
Right, right. And I mean, here's the beautiful thing is when I think of a mortgage broker and a lender, I think then adding in that client. That's the triangle, right? If the lender and the broker are on the side of the table working together for the client, then it's a win-win. Whenever the lender and the broker feel like they're at odds, that's when the client gets lost. That's when the transaction gets lost. You know,
Hmm.
I remember I had a broker call me one day and he was immediately started yelling on the phone. And I said, I just need to slow you down. I need to stop you right here. I don't think we've ever met. And he said, no, we've never met. I'm so angry. And I said, if we had met and if we had already spoken, you wouldn't be yelling right now because you would know that no one has to yell at Megan McDonald to get her to do the right thing. So why don't we start again? And you can tell me what happened. And then I'm going to tell you how much I'm going to help you. And he was just
Hmm.
completely taken back. And I said, so let's start again. Ring, ring. Hi, I'm Megan.
That's fantastic. I love that. So I want to go back to something you said earlier because you talk about Paul a lot.
Mhm, I
And
do.
I love that the two of you have that sort of mentor mentee relationship and you've got a team. And it seems to be really important to all of you guys to work really, really well together. How much longer has Paul spent at MCAP than you? I'm curious because he sort of seems to be able to have created and curated this culture in and around your team that was one of growth. Because you said you joined MCAP because their story seemed a lot like yours. It's like the
Yeah.
Alexander Hamilton kid from the outside. I'm coming up and, we're going to figure this thing out. We're going to do big,
Yeah.
amazing things. And for some reason, that's like tends to like start attracting people of
Does.
similar mindsets. So like that's Paul and then that's you and then that's the team. How does all that get created culturally?
Yeah, Paul's been with the company over 30 years.
Hmm.
And with that comes just such extensive information and education on every process and every growth spurt and every lesson that came from that. And I think when Paul talks about MCAP, he speaks about it as if it's an extension of himself. And that's really what you want. You want an executive team that believes that the company is part of them because the ego always does everything for ourselves. Well, imagine if a company was an extension of thyself. You are going to make the right decisions, you're going to make clear decisions, and you're going to drive a culture that says, we're going to do our best every single day. And when I met Paul Bruce, I was very young. I had actually been asked to join a small group of MCAPers within Toronto, and Paul and I won the same award on the same night and had never met a day before that. And what was interesting about that day is we got up there, we took our awards, we shook our hands, and we didn't speak for 3 more years. And then
Mm.
on the day that we spoke was because I was considering leaving MCAP and the company was going through some changes. And I was recognizing that those changes were happening. And I wasn't sure if I was part of those changes. And Paul came to meet with me. He was actually, a lot of people came to him and said, you should really meet with Megan. And he said, I don't think I know Megan. He goes, no, you do know Megan. You met Megan on a stage years ago when you won an award together. And he said, all right. And he came to the office that I was working at. And within 30 minutes, he wrote on a whiteboard the entire vision of MCAP for the next 10 years that he had in mind. And I just was blown away. Number one, that someone would share a vision like that with somebody. Number two, with no strings attached. and that he was vulnerable and strong enough to put his ideas out there on the line. And when he was done, he said, "Do you want to be part of something great?" And, the joke of Jerry Maguire, "You had me at hello."
Right. Right. Yeah. So you have a girl who dreams big, and then somebody else puts their dream out in front of them and says, let's go do
So,
this together. Say, okay.
and just so you know, like that's how it gets. So, like the next
Yeah.
person that talks to me, I'm outlining the dream. The next person talks to the next person, they're outlining the dream. And all of a sudden, people are talking about this dream of MCAP, going to be number one, going to grow, going to acquire, going to build. And people want to be a part of something, but most importantly, they want to be a part of something great.
Yeah, I agree. So what is that thing now? Because if I'm not mistaken, MCAP's number one. If not number one, then it's definitely knocking on the door. It's up there. But
Yeah.
what do you guys get in a room now? I mean, I've been through that, right? I was with Rocket in the US. We're the 12th largest lender in Michigan, I think ish, when I started, and then went on to
Yeah.
become like the largest lender in the world at that time. And actually, the idea of being number one, actually, I don't even know if we fully believed it when we were saying it, right? Like we kind of
Yeah.
believed it. It looked great on a
Yeah.
whiteboard, but
Yeah.
you're talking about passing Chase and Bank of America and Wells Fargo. It'd
Yeah.
be similar to, being a tiny little player in Canada today, talking about passing Royal Bank and TD, and people go, okay, that's great. But then you
Yeah.
actually go out and do it, and wow. But how does that conversation sound now for you guys after getting so big and seeing so much success?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it's a funny thing. You can be number one, and that's great, but you can be number one in a million different categories. So you can be the biggest. And then the question is, are you the most innovative? Are you the most efficient? Are you the greatest culture? Like you can pick a million things that you want to be number one at. And I think being the biggest was one of the goals we wanted to be number one at. But we also want to be number one in technology. We also want to be number one when it comes to changes that come with technology like AI. We also want to become number one to be the number one best place to work. We want to be number one in creating the most dynamic and interesting culture in Canada. So I think for MCAP, it doesn't just apply to volume or it doesn't just apply to scale. We have a lot of different goals to be number one. And our business continues to shift. And it's been amazing to see how it's shifted in diversity. It's been interesting to see how we've led a huge charge in women gaining leadership roles in our business. When Elaine Taylor and I became co VPs, we were the only co female VPs in the industry. And that
Mm-hmm.
was over 10 years ago today. But since then, we've seen an evolution of women taking over large leadership roles in our industry, which is fantastic. So you can lead in a million different ways. And what we're interested in, honestly, is like which one will we pick today to try to take on? I mean, most recently, we did over the last couple of years our Blue Culture campaign. We wanted to do one of the most dynamic, fun, educational videos regarding our brokers and why they chose MCAP. We chose one of the best groups to do the video recording. We chose the best brokers across the country to interview. And I have brokers every day and our own competitors who come up to me and speak to me about blue culture. So for now, we're happy to be number one, but number one in what category? And so I'll tell you the big thing for us is to be number one subservicing company in Canada. We want to make sure that we're growing and helping the Canadian consumer find options, and subservicing is a big part of our business. We also want to be the number one when it comes to technology for clients to view their mortgage. We call that My MCAP. You can go in, search your mortgage, make some changes. We were the first company in Canada to offer a switch during COVID where you could go in online, click a button to defer your payments. You didn't have to wait, you didn't have to call, you didn't have to justify. So, as you can see, there's a few ways we like to be number one, and that's going to keep changing and that's going to keep evolving. And hopefully, we're going to work toward it.
I like that because I heard this saying many years ago. I say it all the time, but especially when people start quoting the number of years at which they've been doing something. And a lot of times I was like, hey, I've been doing this 20 years. And most people, truthfully, have done like 1 year of experience, 1 year of work repeated 20 times. So if you're not actually learning anything new and you're not actually growing for all the subsequent years, then 1 year is as good as 20 for most people. And something I think about is like, I'm typically trying to identify the people who actually are learning something new over the course of 20 or, in Paul's case, 32 years or whatever it is. Because if you're constantly thinking about what to do next and going out and tackling that and then teaching and teaching and teaching and learning and learning and learning, well, then you're actually learning over the course of 32 years. There's actually 32 years worth of knowledge. But if all you've got is 1 year of knowledge repeated 32 times, that's not really helpful.
No, and it's not exciting. And I will tell you,
Yeah.
there is never a dull day at MCAP, because if I was to describe MCAP as a company, I would say we're a bunch of people that are likely should have been business for self who have come together under a brand. There's not a day that goes by that somebody at the executive level will refer to their KPIs or their objectives. Like, we know them, they're tattooed on us, and it simply is hashtag winning. Like, it is a desire we all have whenever we're meeting. It's how can we be better? How can we be bigger? It is a room of entrepreneurial thinkers. It is not a room of people waiting to get a list of tasks to achieve.
Mm-hmm.
Paul Bruce, I think it was a couple of years ago, he's laughing at me. I said I was so stressed out. I had so much on my plate. And he started laughing. And he goes, "Well, you don't have me to blame. I haven't actively been your boss since the day you started. You've been your boss. So if you're overloaded, then you're the boss here, not me." He was right. I mean, at the end of the day, Paul doesn't call me and say, "What have you achieved?" I phone Paul and tell him what I'm going to do to change the landscape of the mortgage environment in Canada. That is the way the game is played at MCAP.
That's an awesome way to think about it. I often think about that as it relates back to my calendar. Sometimes I get like really busy. I'm sure like you do or others do. And I'll have to remind myself, I literally control it. Like I don't
100%.
have anybody telling me like what to do every minute of my day
No.
or telling me when I can like take a lunch or not take a
Nope.
lunch. And hold on, let's take stock here. Where can I spend my time that make things most impactful so that we can go out and we can achieve our goals and I can achieve my personal goals as we go along? Like something as simple as baking meditation into my day, something I did a few years ago that, felt like a big deal for me at the time. But I knew that there was this period of the day where I would, by 12:30, 1 o'clock, I would need a reset. But instead of actually resetting, I would barrel through and I would just get more miserable and more agitated as the day went on. And I'm like, why? Who's telling me to do this? Like, no one is telling me that I can't take 30 minutes in the middle of the day to stop, pause, reset, and then have a great afternoon after the fact. I took control.
Yeah, and I think many of my family members will tell you I'm a control freak. What I am is I'm a choice freak. I know this is all my choice. I know that every decision I make in the day is for me to make. No one is making me show up. No one is making me do anything. And I think when you come back to that place of power, you will own your day to day. And a couple things that happened a few years ago is I really dove in, as you're talking about meditation, I really dove into health and wellness. I mean, I would start an occasional national meeting with, "How many glasses of water have you drank today?" It's your choice. "How many of you have had your greens today?" That's your choice. "How many of you got 8 hours sleep last night?" That's your choice. "How many of you are exercising 4 times a week?" That's your choice. This is an era where people often feel their life just takes off and they have no choice. There's so much choice in the day. And especially if you are in this industry has tons of opportunity for people who want it. There's tons of way to communicate today through the web and social media if you want to. So there is never anyone holding us hostage. And the minute you start to understand how much power you have, you won't believe what you would choose to do with your day. And it is your choice.
It's absolutely your choice. I often ask people the question, are you owning your day or is the day owning you? You could see it on people's faces sometimes, right? You're just like, oh, this day's owning you. Well, what if instead we like took a step back and what would it look like for you to actually own the day? And it was something I did coming into 2025 was I started with an exercise, like basically framed a question. I feel like I've had a great day when, and I'm a planner. We're probably similar in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
Can definitely be accused of being a control freak. It's mostly fun, but not always for everybody in my life. And I always start with like really, really, really big dreams and goals. And that's okay because I appreciate, just having a big vision and being a visionary. But what often creates the end goal or the outcome is what I do in the day to day, just like literally day by day by day, not even in 90 days, forget quarters, forget all that stuff. Just like, what do I do today? I wake up super early. I get my workout in. I've already had water. And then I've like accomplished like 5 things before anyone else has even started their day. I'm like, that's an awesome feeling. Like I am fully caught up on emails and text message returns and all these other things. By the time my team walks into the office for the day, I'm like, hey, how are you doing? I'm in a great mood. I'm greeting people. I just feel fantastic. And I just took control of my own day to day, and it'll slip on me over time. And, right now I'm in a 7-day a week workout routine. I'll miss a day or two here or there, and then I'll have to come back and I'll start a new streak. So I build it in streaks, but that is so important. You sound really motivated by going out and just winning that day. So I am curious now, what are you most motivated by, and what are some things that you're personally attacking in the day to day?
Yeah, great question. So I think I'll start with something a little controversial that I actually believe that motivation is kind of crap. I believe that you are either born with an insatiable drive or you're not. And I meet people every day, and I can tell who has it and I can tell who doesn't. And some of us just play by the rule book of the robot and we put out our day and we do it, and you can get it done. You can get it done like that all day long. But if you are a person that was born with an insatiable drive, and albeit when I was very young, it went in very wrong directions, and I was a very bad girl sometimes, but that is because I wanted to do things. And sometimes the rule book didn't apply. And I think for me, I have an insatiable desire to learn. I have an insatiable desire to grow. When I think about not what motivates me, but what are my values are education. My values are growth. My values are contribution. My values are helping others. My value is showing up and being present. And my whole day revolves around that. So, a great example is if you were to look at my everyday, it's almost the exact same. And it's the exact same because I asked myself, what do I want that day to look like? And what I want it to look like is I want to look organized. I want to look professional. I want to look dynamic. I want to look in it. I want to look like I can have the answers or find the answers. I want to show up curious. I want to show up open minded. Well, what does it take to do that? Well, it takes getting up early. I work east and west. I have a management team that is up at their desk at 6 a.m. my time. So that means I'm getting up even earlier. That means I'm making sure I'm eating well and getting great sleep and going to bed on time. There is a program that I live by and I love by because it has helped me be the person that I always wanted to be. And again, that came down to choice. And things have shown up in my life, and there's been disappointments, and there have been personal challenges, and there's been professional challenges. But I always sit back and I look at that commitment I've made to myself to get to the goals I've always wanted. And by the way, it ain't sexy. It ain't sexy at all. In fact, it's
Mm-hmm.
very hard and it's very disciplined. But then I can be here with you right now and be incredibly engaged, positive, and passionate about what I do because I do those other things that aren't so great. It is my moment to shine because I've done the work in the off hours to make sure the on hours are nothing but.
So I'm curious to get into a little bit more detail on that, because what you just said is so important and so impactful. And if I'm listening, I go, awesome. How do I do that? So, A, it sounds like that flame better be born lit. It's hard to light it otherwise, right? Like, I love that you said that motivation is often overrated and oftentimes misunderstood, and you can't teach that part, but you can inspire, I believe, right? So you can inspire somebody who's already motivated. You can influence that, but like you can't get them to do the day to day of what's it going to take. So, you talked about having a structure. What does structure look like for you, such that you can go out and you can make the most of each day?
Yeah, it's systems. You got to build a life of systems. So I look at every day as a system. I look at food as fuel. I look at sleep as restorative rest for my brain, my energy. I look at fitness as strain? Am I hitting enough strain so I can sleep well that night? Am I hitting enough strain so I can have a healthy heart? And if I have a healthy heart, my blood pressure is going to be low. If I do enough weight training, can I make sure that I have enough mobility and strength to have a day that is 10 hours on the phone, nonstop, making magic happen? I mean, at the end of the day, I got really intensely into the coaching culture and understanding what creates great performance. And quite often, what I found myself was looking at Olympians, looking at great athletes, and they live and die by systems. Whether you're a great football player, whether you're a great tennis player, you have systems in what you eat, how much water you drink, the food you choose to eat. I mean, I have decided 3 years ago to go sober. I'm not an advocate for sobriety, but that was a system that worked for me. I looked at everything as a system, not just a pleasure. And some people might go, your life must not be filled with so much pleasure. I love working. I love giving 100%. I love showing up for my husband. I love showing up for my friends and family. I love being generous with my time and my fortune. But these systems are what allow me to do that, right? This is
Mhm.
about understanding our personal limitations and then what can we do to perhaps move above them. So for myself, when I looked at myself a couple of years ago, my husband had a tragic accident. I fell into PTSD. I was deeply struggling. And where did I go? I went to my systems. I took a look at what I was doing and how I was doing it. I went and got a therapist. I went and got brain therapy. I said to everybody, I want you to imagine that I'm going to the Olympics in 6 months. And in fact, I was going up for a promotion for senior vice president. When my husband had his accident, my promotion was put on hold. Susan, no hold here. How do I get back in the game? And I've reached out to all my resources, my mentors, my coaches, and I have many. And I said, what is it going to take for Megan McDonald to become a top of her game again? So this promotion is in question, that this is the life I want to live. How can I get there? And one of those questions that came up was, what about sobriety? And if you're in sales, you have a good laugh and you say, that's funny, talk to you later. But I had to decide for myself if I could make that leap and what that leap would mean to my business, what that leap would make for my personal life, and what that leap would make for me. And so I took it, I built it into my systems, and now I'm 3 years sober. One of the best decisions I ever made, but for me, because that system allowed for better sleep, that system allowed for less anxiety, that system allowed for less depression, that system allowed for me to get up earlier to go to the gym, that system allowed for less recovery days. Like it all just became a system to me. And listen, if you can run your life by default, God bless you. I wish I was one of them. I'm not.
Yeah.
I live my life by design.
Yeah. If I break away for even just a moment. And that's why I say I work out 7 days a week, because for me, not sober, but I know the cost of a drink on a Saturday night means that
Yeah.
I'm going to grind through my Sunday morning. I know what the cost is. Like, I know what it
Yes.
is. Luckily, I've never been a heavy drinker anyways,
Yeah.
or someone who, partakes in such a way that like makes me feel terrible. But I know, even the cost of like staying up too late on that
Absolutely.
night, even without a drink, and waking up with a raspy voice and a little less sleep than I'd like, but still having to like do the hard thing the next morning. It's why I do the hard thing the next morning, because that's actually more important to me than the thing from the night before. When you start to recalibrate that and you build a system around it and you push yourself to like stay on track to that system,
Yeah.
it
Yeah.
does create balance. And by the way, the best salespeople that I've ever seen, they're incredibly systematic. I know that there's just some raw, talented people out there. I've seen them do
Yeah.
it, but the question becomes for how long, I think,
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
I'll take the person whose calendar looks robotic every day for 20 years, over a 20-year time frame, compared to the person who's just naturally talented. I think I did have the gift of being naturally talented in my early years, but as I started to become an adult, natural and raw talent wasn't enough. It is, in a way, like you said, like being a professional athlete where, hey, raw talent in high school might be enough. Then you get to, let's say, university level sports, and oh my goodness, so the rest of these kids are all taking it pretty seriously. They're raw talent and they're dedicated, more
And they're
dedicated than I am.
dedicated.
And then you go to the next level and it's like,
Yeah.
oh my gosh, not only are they talented, they're dedicated, like just another level of dedication that I'm playing against now. So like the higher level you play the game, the harder it gets, right?
It's amazing that you brought that up because that was the kickoff to 2025 was talent is not enough. And in this
Mm,
game and this market, it's getting more and more competitive. And if you're sitting back on the laurels of your talent, you are in yesterday's club, not today's winning circle. And this is what recognizing consistent evolution is all about. I mean, and by the way, I don't make this stuff up. It is all around us. I mean, I'm a knowledge junkie, so it's a podcast every morning while I'm making my coffee before I'm even up. It's a book. It's a this. It's a Calm app. I mean, I learned from the Calm app. LeBron James did a whole session on why sleep is critical for him being the number one basketball player in the world, if you believe he is.
hmm.
And I think there's so much out there if you dare to listen and dare to try it and say, you know what, if this person can be successful and they do this, and this person can be successful and they do this, what if I tried that on? Not all systems are going to work for all people, but you can find out what it is. I mean, a great example would be is I wear a Whoop and I study my sleep and I study my strain and I study my stress and I monitor my behavior based on that. And I was able to influence my husband to some degree to start monitoring his sleep. Well, the greatest discovery of his life was found that all of his REM sleep happens between 5 a.m. and 7 a.m. Well, I guess we're not catching any more flights at 6 a.m. anymore. Like he performs at his best when he gets that sleep between 5 and 7, because over a 6 week period, we were able to define that that is where he gets his deepest and best sleeps. Well, then we'll just work the systems around that.
Hmm.
It's that famous line, if you don't know thyself, my God, how can you tackle the world? Know your limits, play within it, build your systems, and have great goals, share them with everyone and anyone who will ever listen, take great feedback and advice, and keep going.
Such actionable, good takeaways on that, which I appreciate. I have a question for you. So, what are you following in the macro right now? What are you paying attention to at, a broader scale that helps you be a great business person and ultimately run a great business?
Yeah. Okay. So, well, the biggest trend right now, I would say, in the industry is volatility. If you're not reading the news, watching the news, and being caught up on the news of what's going on in our world, you're likely not going to be able to give your client, whatever client that is, realtor, mortgage broker, referral source, you're not going to be able to give them the comfort that you need to give them. Here's the thing, people want to work with people they know, like, and trust. Well, how do you build trust? You share with them some facts and some information about what's going on in the world. You ask them a million questions about what they need and what they want and what they're worried about. And then you help bring that together for them. And so, right now, because of all the changes since COVID, I mean, if anything has been consistent since COVID, it's change. And if change is the one consistent thing right now, you should be up to date with what it is. And that means not necessarily having an opinion. And I want to be a little bit firm on that. The world is not short on opinion. It is very short on people that understand it and able to place it with that client's needs and wants. And so, if there's a trend right now, for me, it's educating yourself on what's happening in our industry, interest rates, the current trends, what some bank economists are viewing as the future, and then sharing that with your clients so they know that, number one, I've chosen an educated source. I've chosen a source that understands what's going on in our industry and wants to choose the best and most secure product from my circumstance. So I think that right now is what people are needing most, is assurance. And I think that's one of the ways to do it.
For sure. I mean, that's the impact of mortgage brokers is knowledge and being able to share that and then ultimately helping clients to the right financial decision. So, going to impact, I want to close by just asking you about yours and what you want for the time ahead. I mean, you've accomplished some amazing things. You talk about your younger years. You're still young. So presumably you've got quite the road ahead, especially given all the health. So what do you want to accomplish in your life and career, and how do you think about impact?
Yeah, great question. Impact for me has definitely evolved. So at one point, impact for me was very selfish in that sense of what can I do? What will that look like? What will that get me? And I remember years ago, I had a health scare and I was sitting at the hospital with my mother. And my mother is from New York City. She's very honest, she's very forthright. And she started laughing as I'm sitting there because what am I doing? I'm returning emails on my phone as I'm about to go into surgery. And she started laughing. And I said, okay, Mary, what are you laughing about? And she goes, oh, I was just thinking about what your tombstone would say. And I said, oh, really? That's lovely. Would you mind sharing? She goes, yes, Megan McDonald, an outstanding employee. And I
Hmm.
think that was a wake up call to me about what that legacy would be and how do I want to be remembered. And that's definitely not it. Probably for my 20s, maybe I would have taken it. But now I am turning 45 this year, and I really want to be known as a person that supported other leaders. I want to help create amazing people who want to do amazing work. I want to give them a voice. I want to give them a channel. I want to give them an opportunity. I want to be known as a tremendous family member that was generous and giving and kind. I want to be known as an amazing wife that stood by somebody's side and said, you can do anything. And I want to be known at MCAP as a leader that tried new things and had the courage to make mistakes and try again. So I think that's the legacy I'm looking for. Again, it's not perfection, it is partnership. I'm not alone in this world. I did not get here by myself, and I will not get to the next level by myself. And so it is about community for me, and how can I build that? And how can I instill in other people that is community that will get them where they want to go one day?
That was wonderful. Thank you for sharing, and thank you for being on the podcast today, Megan. This has been a fantastic conversation.
Yeah, no, I really appreciate your time.